na 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 nay nay na 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 nay 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 na nay 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 na na nay na na nay 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 na 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 nay 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 na 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 nay 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 na nay 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 na na nay Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Yimloch Le'olam va'ed Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Yimloch Le'olam va'ed והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 השם מלך השם מלך לעולם ועד השם מלך השם מלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 nay na 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 nay 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 na nay השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 nay nay na na nay 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 na nay 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 na nay na na nay na nay na na nay 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 na na nay 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 na nay oy nay nay na na nay oh צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. שטויים בבית השם, בחצרות אלוקינו יפריחו, עוד ינובון בשיבה. דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר השם צורי ולא עוולת בו. נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי אולי נא נא נאי נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. השם, בחצרות אלוקינו יפריחו, עוד ינובון בשיבה, שנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר השם, צורי ולא עוולה תבוא. נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי, נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי, נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי, נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי. הישראלי צריך תמיד להסתכל בשכל של כל דבר ולקשר עצמו אל החוכמה והשכל שיש בכל דבר כדי שיעיר לו השכל שיש בכל דבר להתקרב להשם יתברך על ידי אותו הדבר. כי איש הישראלי צריך תמיד להסתכל בהשכל של כל דבר ולקשר כל דבר כדי שיעיר לו השכל שיש בכל דבר להתקרב על ידי אותו הדבר. כי השכל הוא אור גדול ומאיר לו בכל דרכיו כמו שכתוב חוכמת אדם האיר פניו. כי איש הישראלי צריך תמיד להסתכל בהשכל של כל דבר ולקשר עצמו אל החוכמה והשכל שיש בכל דבר כדי שיעיר לו השכל שיש בכל דבר להתקרב להשם יתברך על ידי אותו הדבר. כי השכל הוא אור גדול ומאיר לו בכל דרכיו לקשר עצמו אל החוכמה והשכל שיש בכל דבר, כדי שיעיר לו השכל שיש בכל דבר, להתקרב להשם יתברך על ידי אותו הדבר, להתקרב להשם יתברך על ידי אותו הדבר. אוי נאי איי נאי אוי נאי.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין, בריח אורנים, נישא ברוח הערביים עם כל פעמונים, ובתרדמת אילן באבן שבויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. איך יבשו בורות המים, כיכר השוק ריקה, ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע והלילות רוחות, ואין יורד ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. אך בבואי היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור כתרים, קטונתי מצעיר בנייך ומאחרוני המשוררים. כשמך צורבת השפתיים כנשיקת שרף, אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר כולה זהב. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. חזרנו אל בורות המים, לשוק ולכיכר, שופר קורא בהר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע אלפי שמשות זורחות, נשוב נרד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו. ירושלים זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור, כינור.
אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין. אוי ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אוי ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין. ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. נאי נא נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נא נאי. אף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אוי, ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ודע שהאדם צריך לעבור על שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And welcome to this week's Torah study. We're going to be continuing, and this time I absolutely promise finishing Leviticus chapter 19, and we'll move on probably today, if not for sure next time, to Leviticus chapter 20. So we were having some technical problems, so I'm sorry for the delay. There was a mistake in the link that was posted for YouTube, but I think it's been cleaned up. However, well, I'll just have to rely on people to have the common sense, the sechel, to figure out that if they want to find the study, then they should know where to find it. Many of the people who come to the study have already been here long enough, and if it's a link in the YouTube, then they have means of either contacting me or figuring out where it is. Okay, no big deal. We're going to continue. So, any rate, I welcome you to today's study. As I said, we're going to be continuing in Leviticus chapter 19. And I'm broadcasting to you, of course, today from Katzrin in the Golan Heights in Israel, where I've relocated. I've been in Katzrin now for about August, September, October, really, I guess about 2 months or so. About 2 months before that, I was living in Tekoa, in outside of Jerusalem, in Yehuda Shomron, in the quote-unquote West Bank. But I found Katzrin through a number of, shall we say, guidances from Yahweh, and this is really where I believe I need to be right now. I feel very much at home here, and it's completely where I believe I need to be at this point in time. It's not always easy living here. As I'm sure you know, there's a war going on up here in the north. We're quite close to the border. We're about, I'd say, 15 miles from, maybe even less, from the Lebanese border. And living here means constantly, day and night, excuse me, hearing the sounds of fighter jets overhead, hearing the sounds of booms in the distance. Usually what those booms are missiles being blown up by the Iron Dome system as Hezbollah bombards the north of Israel with its rockets. And worst of all, when it means hearing sirens, air raid sirens, or whatever you want to call them, azakot, we call them here in Hebrew, when a missile looks like it's going to land in Katsrin. A lot of those missiles are blown up, but every so often they do land in Katsrin or around Katsrin. There was damage, I think, in the past week or so. There's been missiles that have landed in Katsrin or right outside of Katsrin and caused some damage. So it's not a joke. This is the this is the reality of living here. You hear it day and night, all night long. You hear the fighter jets all night long, all day long. You can hear the booms at any time. The siren's going to go off at any time. And when the siren goes off, as I said, that means that a missile, if it's not taken down by the Iron Dome, or if its trajectory is not off, could end up landing, even if it is taken down by the Iron Dome. Pieces of it could land in Katsinin, but it basically means that there is potential nifila, as we call it, a potential fall of a missile or shrapnel from a missile into Katsinin. And when the azakot, when the sirens go off, we go into our safe areas for a period of 10 minutes, but it's very frightening at that point because, no, I won't use the word frightening. It's not frightening because when it's actually happening, it's not a feeling of fear. It's very anticipatory. You're just sitting there waiting, hoping that nothing's going to happen. And so far, nothing has happened. I mean, things have happened to other houses, but where I live, nothing's happened. And you just wait. And it's almost, the feeling's almost like playing Russian roulette. You're sitting there in the safe room and you're just hoping that it's all going to end very soon without any negative consequences. But you really never do know. And that is the situation. So, at any rate, I don't regret that I came to Katsinin. I'm very happy here in Katsinin. I think it's a beautiful little city. The people tend to be very friendly and very helpful. And I like it here. I like it here very much. Here's Love Ya. Hello, Love Ya. And so I don't regret moving here. Quite the opposite. Le'efech. I feel like this is my mission. I did a lot of thinking and praying and meditation, and Yahweh constantly gave me the answer again and again that this is where I need to be. And there were even some, I don't like to use the word miracles, but there was some very coincidental happenings that occurred, which made it very clear to me. I'll just give one as an example. When I was living in Tekoa in the West Bank, and I was really considering at that point not moving to Katsrin. I'd already kind of gotten a little bit used to Tekoa. I'd been there for a couple months. And I was about to take an apartment in Tekoa, which would have been the worst mistake of my life. Really, this is exactly where I need to be. I was about to take an apartment in Tekoa, and I was living in a temporary place, and it was a strange situation. So someone was a sister of a friend was subletting an apartment, and she moved out, or she went somewhere for about 2 months during the summer. So she sublet it to somebody else. Doesn't matter what his name is. We'll just call him. Well, it doesn't. His name is Meir. Okay, so she sublet it to Meir. Okay, so her name was Rachel. Rachel was subletting the apartment, was renting the apartment from the owner of the house. It was like an upstairs apartment in a house. Meir was subletting from Rachel for about 2 months, and I was sharing the apartment with Meir. So I was subletting from Meir, who's a very, very nice guy, and we got along great. But I did not get along with Rachel, who was the lady who was renting the apartment, who sublet it to Meir, from whom I was subletting. Are you confused yet? Because I'm getting confused. At any rate, to make a long story short, the person who lived in the apartment regularly she and I did not get along very well, and she actually didn't even know I was there for a part of the time. And at a certain point, she would just, she lived nearby in another house for a reason that's unimportant at this point. She lived nearby, but she never came up to the apartment. So I was just subletting from Meir, and everything was great. But if she'd found out that I was still living in the apartment, she might have asked me to get out, or who knows? You know, who knows what would have happened. At any rate, I was almost going to take this apartment in Toccoa, and I remember it was a Thursday night, and Mayor told me that Rachel, who I don't get along with, the renter, the true rentee of the apartment, is coming by tomorrow morning. And Mayor said to me, if she sees you, if she sees that I Melech am in the apartment, she might ask me to leave permanently. And I was still getting resettled back in Israel. I didn't want to take the chance of having to find another place suddenly like that. So I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack up all my stuff early in the morning, early Friday morning, put it all in the car, and just get out of Dodge for a couple of hours because I knew she was coming by in the morning, and then I'll come back a couple of hours later. And it was on that day that I was thinking of taking that apartment. I was going to accept the apartment in Toccoa, and then but I'd also been up to Katsinin a couple of times, and I'd also temporarily rented a place in Katsinin, the place I ended up living in, the place I'm living in right now. So I packed up all my stuff early in the morning on Friday, packed it all into the car, which took about, I don't know, 45 minutes or something like that. And I'm sitting in the car, and I said, you know what? I'm in the car. I have all my stuff packed up in the car. I have nothing left in Rachel's apartment. Why don't I just go up to Katsinin? I don't have to commit myself to Katsinin. I'll just spend the Shabbat in Katsinin. If I don't like it, then I'll come back down and I'll rent the apartment in Toccoa on Sunday or Monday, right? So that's what I did. I drove up to Katsinin that Shabbat, and that was if I remember correctly, that was my third time in Katsinin. And once I got up here, I said, that's it. I'm staying. I have to stay. And I really consider that to be I don't like to use the word miracle, a coincidence, or a way of Yahweh showing me or telling me or making me realize that where he wanted me to be was up here in Katsinin. And I really do believe that I have a mission here up in Katsinin, not only to spread true Tanakh, Torah Judaism, whatever you want to call it, true Tanakh, Karaitism to the people in this nation and up here in the north, but honestly to use my prayers and just even my presence to help protect the north. Because the way I look at it, I am probably one of the only people, maybe the only person in all of Katsinin who prays to Yahweh by name. And we know the importance. There are many, many verses that speak about the importance of calling out to the name of Yahweh, praying to Yahweh by name. When we pray, we have to use his name. And I don't think anybody there might be a couple of other people who I don't know about who do it, but practically nobody, and very possibly nobody at all, is praying to Yahweh by his name, calling out to the name of Yahweh to help protect the northern border, to help protect the people of the north. So I feel that is part of my mission, if you want to call it that, up here in the north, to use my, shall we say, unique perspective on the Torah, on the Tanakh, my knowledge that we're supposed to call out to the name of Yahweh, to help to do my little part to protect the people up here, to help protect the northern border, because northern Israel really is in jeopardy at this point in time, without a doubt. We read that Hezbollah has been weakened. I honestly don't know how true that is. That might just be Israeli wishful thinking or quote unquote propaganda. I don't know what the story is. There have been attempts, or there was an attempt that was reported recently to invade the north, the way Hamas invaded the south on October 7, 2023, and apparently that cell, or that the plan, was destroyed by the IDF. Thank God. But who knows? It's the northern border and north of Israel is very much in jeopardy, and probably will remain in jeopardy for a while. So I could do my part. If this is my mission, if this is where Yahweh wants me and needs me to be, then I'm happy to do so. At any rate, so that's the story with that. And I think what we'll do at this point is we'll get right into studying Torah, go right into Leviticus chapter 19. So let me bring that up. I see a lot of people who usually show up didn't show up today. I think that might be a problem because of the YouTube link. So there was a mistake in the YouTube link. I corrected it, but if you didn't get the correct link, or if you know somebody who wants to come to the study and doesn't have the correct link, then please let them know the correct link. Let me just make sure here for 1 second that there's nobody who wants to come who isn't able to come. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Okay, so let me open up Leviticus here, and we'll get started with the study. We're in Leviticus chapter 19. Just give me a second to open up all the sources here. Okay, that should keep us busy for a while. So Leviticus 19. And we're actually approaching the end of Leviticus. I mean, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. This is page 987. 987. There we go. Let me share the screen. Okay, there we go. And let's get going on Leviticus chapter 19. Okay. So we got up to verse 31, I believe. So we're going to start in verse 32. Okay, so just to review, okay, we spoke extensively last week about this verse. This is Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to get some water. Okay, so we spoke extensively last week about this verse, right? Atifnu el ovot el ha'id'onim ativakshu lit'am'a bahem ani Yahweh Elohechem. So we spoke about this, and we went over the story in 2 Samuel chapter 28, if I remember correctly. Is that where it is? 2 Samuel chapter 28. Sounds about right. With the witch of Endor, the Ov of Endor, and how King Saul became desperate. He was fighting against the Philistines. He wasn't getting any answers from Yahweh. Samuel was already dead. And out of desperation, he went to this Ov Endor, this witch of Endor, they usually translate as. But it was an Ov. It's this word right here, the Ovot, which here is translated as mediums. So the medium of Endor, and asked her to raise up Samuel the prophet, who then told him, you're going to be dead tomorrow. And that's exactly what happens. The next day, Saul and his son Jonathan die in battle against the Philistines, right? Okay. All right, let's move on. So verse 32. Everybody can hear me and see me. verse 32, Mipnei seva takum, Wahdarta pnei zaken, Uyareta me Elohecha ani Yahweh. Again, we have the ending here of ani Yahweh. So arise before an old person. Seva, I think they usually translate it as like a hoary head or something like that. The gray-headed. Okay, let's get this word seva for a second. Hoary head, old age. Okay, gray hair. BDB says hoary head, old age. And it appears in many, many places. Feminine of save. Let me just look at this for my own edification here. Okay. Okie dokie. So arise before an elderly person, or a person with gray hair. Okay. V'hadarta pnei zaken, and give glory. Hadar is usually translated as glory. Give glory to the face of the elderly, of an old man. Uyareta me Elohecha ani Yahweh, and fear your God. I am Yahweh. Okay, so we are told to rise up before a gray-headed person, gray-headed man, gray-headed person. And I can say that I don't know if they do it all over the place, but I know that probably they do it in a lot of the bus companies. But I do remember that when I used to ride the bus in Jerusalem, that this verse was quoted. This was on a sticker next to, how the first couple of seats in a bus are for the handicapped or the elderly, right? Maybe in America, I think they used to say, please leave the seat for the handicapped or the elderly. Well, here in Israel, they had this verse quoted. It would say, "Mipnei seva takum," rise before the hoary-headed person, the hoary-headed man. Okay? And this is just obviously a verse saying, give respect to your elders. We've seen a lot of these types of verses in Leviticus. Give proper respect to your elders. In fact, it's reiterated in that second part, V'data pnei zaken, give glory to the face of an old person. Honor the face of an old person. Okay? And so I just want to point a couple of things out about the structure of this verse here, of this pasuk here. Shalom Paul. Okay, which is we see classic parallelism. Okay, there's synonymic parallelism, there's antonymic parallelism, and there's augmented parallelism. And the three types of parallelism they usually speak about in the verses of the Tanakh. This is synonymic parallelism. Okay, this phrase here, "Mipnei seva takum," arise before the hoary-headed man. "V'hadarta pnei zaken," and honor the face of the elderly man. Okay, these are synonymical. These are synonymous. Okay, these are expressing the same idea, and we say it every Torah study that. So this essentially constitutes repetition. Okay, and repetition, as we say, pretty much every Torah study means emphasis. So the Torah here is expressing the idea twice to give it the emphasis. Okay, these are not two different commandments: to rise before the hoary-headed man and to honor the face of the elderly man. This is the same commandment or the same instruction. I don't like the word commandment in this case because it's more like a rule for life kind of thing. Okay, second, let me drink. The Torah is repeating it for emphasis. Okay, we see this in English. Okay, we see this in any language, pretty much. I don't know about any language, but in many languages where things are repeated in slightly different ways to get the point across. Okay, I don't know, you kids get off my lawn, you dumb teenagers get out of my yard. Okay, right? The repetition provides emphasis. It's expressing the same idea, but it's expressing it with different words in order to really get the point across. Okay, if I say something twice, it means I'm really serious about it, or maybe it's going to get into your thick skull a little bit more, right? You kids who are on my lawn, it's going to get into your thick skull a little bit more than if it's said just once. Okay, so that's interest. That's to point out how the Torah is working. Okay, now I don't know. We know that the rabbis, they count up their 613 mitzvot. They may count this as two mitzvot. I have no idea. Okay, 613 is a fabricated number. There are not necessarily 613 mitzvot in the Torah. I can't remember. I read somewhere what the reason is. Believed that they came up with 613. Maybe it has some meaning in gematria. I don't remember. I read it I think a month or two ago. Okay, but this is the same commandment, or this is the same piece of wisdom. It's almost like a proverb, right? It's a commandment, but it's kind of like a rule for life. And it's basically saying respect your elders, have proper respect for your elders. And it's doing it illustratively. Rise up, or rise before the hoary-headed man. Okay? Honor the face of the elderly man. I had a friend, very special friend. I've been out of contact with him for many years. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everybody. I'll mention it again. The YouTube link that I published was incorrect. There was an extra slash in it. So if you know anyone who's looking for the study and can't find it, then please let them know. I tried to send out the corrected link. I don't know if everybody got it or what the story is, but there was a mistake in the YouTube link. I know a lot of people usually join us on YouTube. At any rate, so this piece of wisdom, or this instruction for life, is basically saying, obviously, respect your elders. Okay, and then it's explaining why you should do that. Ani Yahweh. Okay, and you shall fear your God. And I just want to see one thing here. So it's the idea it's really expressing here, I think, is why should you do this, or what is going to make you honor an elderly person? Because elderly people are physically weak. Okay, they can easily be overpowered, taken advantage of, mugged, robbed. Anyone who lives in the glorious country known as the United States of America is more than familiar with that, especially if you live in some of these lovely cities like the greatest city in the world, New York. I say that sarcastically. It's a complete dump. Right? So what's to stop us from taking advantage? Oh, I was going to say something. I'll get back to that afterwards. What's to stop us from taking advantage of an elderly person? Okay. There's nothing physically to stop us if we're strong and middle-aged or young. Okay. We can easily mug them. We can, mug a little old lady walking down the street. It's fear your God. Have fear of your God. It's fear of our God. It's fear of Yahweh that would prevent us, okay, from taking advantage, or from not giving proper honor, or from exploiting or taking advantage of the elderly. If there's no fear of God in a country, in a society, then we see where that society goes. Okay, we can even look back in in Genesis very quickly. If I can find it. And it's going to be around, let me close this out. It's going to be around Genesis. Abraham, Isaac. I think it was Abraham, and it's going to be around 14, I think chapter 14 or so. War of the Kings. Lot, Abram last is no, 15 is the Ben of Bitarim. Go on. Hagan and Ishmael. Oh, I can't find it now. All right, let me just Google it. Let's ask Rabbi Google. Sarah taken by Avimelech. I'm sorry, by Avimelech. Genesis 20. So let's look at Genesis 20 for a second. Okay. And I'll just go to the English to make it flow a little bit more quickly. Okay, so Genesis 20. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Then Avimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. Right? Why not? He thinks she's an unmarried woman. But God came to Avimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She's a married woman." Now Avimelech had not gone near her, meaning not slept with her. So he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister'? And didn't she say, 'He is my brother'? I've done this with a clear conscience and clean hands." Except that he kidnapped her. But even to this day, believe it or not, kidnapping brides is it Kazakhstan, I believe. They still kidnap brides. If you want to marry someone, if you want to marry a young woman, you kidnap her and you take her away for 3 days. I can't remember the exact details, but look it up on the internet. You'll see how shidduchim are done in a real man's world. In a real man's society. Okay. Then God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, so I've kept you from sinning against me. This is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he's a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all who belong to you will die." Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You've done things to me that should never be done." Right? So Abimelech is mad, and rightfully so, right? You could have brought great sin on my people by making me sleep by potentially having me sleep with a married woman, by not telling me she was married, by telling me that she was your sister and not your wife. Avimelech asked Abraham, "What was the reason for doing this?" And here's the point. Avram replied, "I said to myself, there's surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." Okay? We'll go on a little bit, then we'll get back to this. "Besides, she is really my sister, the daughter of my father, not of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, 'This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother,'" etc. Okay? So the key verses here, Avram replied, "I said to myself," so Avimelech asked Avram, what was your reason for doing this? Avram replied, "I said to myself, there's surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." In other words, they in a place where there's no fear of God, anything goes. Okay? Murder and adultery. Okay? Avram sensed that there was no fear of God in this place, and that they would not refrain from murder and adultery. Well, I guess if they murder him first, technically it's not adultery because she's not a married woman, but you get the idea, right? And that's the point. When you have societies where there is no fear of God, then anything goes. All of the 10 commandments will be violated, every single one of them. There'll be violence. There'll be bloodshed. There'll be adultery. All the 10 Commandments. The Kitzur. In short, all of the 10 Commandments will be violated, and many more. Okay? So, but what does fear of God do? It prevents us from doing whatever we want, from acting like animals. Okay? Animals, I have 2 cats, and they have absolutely no problem if I put food down, and let's say there's happens to be a little stray cat that comes into the yard sometimes, and she's very skinny, so I try to give her some food. And my 2 cats, who are well fed because they're my pets, they have no problem whatsoever, just growling at her and swiping at her to chase her away, even though they have plenty of food and she has no food, and they're bigger than her and she's small, because they have no fear of God, because they're cats. They just follow their nature. So a society where there's no fear of God, then the big fish are just going to swallow the small fish. The strong are going to devour the weak. The privileged are going to devour the non-privileged, and so on and so forth. The rich are going to devour the strong. We see such a society. It's called the United States of America. Well, there is a lot of fear of God in the United States of America, right? There are a lot of God-fearing people. They don't believe in the right God, but at least they believe in a God. And I used to have this discussion all the time with people. What's worse, to be an atheist or to believe in a false God? And I think at the end of the day, I came to the conclusion that to believe in a false God is better than to believe, and better than to be an atheist, believe it or not. Because at least if you believe in a false God, you do believe usually that God enforces some kind of morality. Whereas if you're an atheist, you can be moral through the concept of utilitarianism, or the concept of, don't do unto others as you would not want others to do unto you, for all kinds of practical reasons. There are many moral atheists who will not murder and not steal, and so on. But but the fear of a God, maybe even the wrong one, is perhaps superior, because you believe that there is some higher force that's enforcing some kind of morality. Of course, it's a false God. It'll be a very flawed morality, but at least maybe that's better than not having any God at all. At any rate, that's a philosophical discussion to have over a cup of coffee somewhere. But the point is that surely, don't call me Shirley, surely, where there is no fear of God, then nobody is safe. Then it will always be the strong devouring the weak. And that's exactly what we see. Yeah, Kazakhstan, Borat's country. Exactly. Did you? Oh, good. I'm glad more people showed up. Because again, the link on YouTube was wrong. I published it incorrectly. There was an extra slash in it. So if you know people who are looking for the study and can't find it, please let them know. So Tsuri, there was I don't know if you ever saw this. You can look it up on YouTube. So when Borat did his movie, he made a Kazakhstani national anthem, and one time there was some kind of sports event, and they played, and the Kazakhstani woman won the sports event, and by mistake they played the Borat's version of the Kazakhstani national anthem rather than the actual correct Kazakhstani national anthem. Anyway, go look it up on YouTube. You'll get a good laugh out of that one if you haven't seen it. Okay, so getting back to our verses here in Leviticus chapter 19, we see exactly the situation. Rise before a hoary-headed man, hoary-headed person, I'll just say man, rise before a hoary-headed man and honor the face of an elderly person, an elderly man. Repetition, synonymous repetition, synonymic repetition, emphasis, and then we're given I wouldn't call it a reason, but a motive behind it, or a remembrance behind it. I don't know what we call it, a reason, a food for thought behind it, which is v'yireta me'elohecha, fear your God. Because if you don't fear your God, then there's no reason for you, who are the stronger one, to honor an elderly person who is the physically weaker one. The big fish will just devour the little fish. And then we're reminded at the end, as we are so many times throughout what we've been calling the Holiness Code, even though that is a secular a delineation for the Torah. I'll just use it anyway so that you're familiar with it, and also because even if it is not, as the secular biblical scholars claim, from a separate author, nonetheless it does follow certain patterns. So we'll just call it the Holiness Code. And we see so many times throughout, especially here in Leviticus chapter 19, that it ends with Ani Yahweh. So we get a double reminder: fear your God, Ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh. And we've seen this pattern again. I'll point it out. Okay, let's see. I think it was every second verse we see ends with Ani Yahweh. Okay, so verse 2, where does it start? So verse 2 ends with Ani Yahweh Elohechem. Verse 3 ends with Ani Yahweh Elohechem. Verse 4 ends with Ani Yahweh Elohechem. Verse 5, no. Verse 6, no. Okay, so that's technical about the sacrifices. But I think starting here, if I remember correctly, right? So 9 doesn't, 10 does. 11 doesn't, 12 does. 13 doesn't, 14 does. 16 does. 18 does. Ani Yahweh. 20. Where were we? So then we have that. That's a commandment that goes on for a couple of lines. That was with the woman that was engaged, or I'm sorry, the concubine that was engaged to a man, but is given time to be redeemed. So it breaks the pattern a little bit. Lim Yahweh, Ani Yahweh. Any rate, I don't know if it's every other verse, but I think for a while it followed that pattern of every other verse. Okay, and certainly we see it here. Well, here we see it in 29. Here we see it in 31. Where we are. Okay, so we're constantly reminded, Ani Yahweh. Okay, don't forget who's telling you these laws. And a lot of these laws, as we've seen, are about being kind to those who are the weaker, are the downtrodden, are the less powerful in society, such as leaving the corner of the fields for the poor and for the ger. Okay, let's go on. Verse 33. Let's get a Robert Alter on that one. So chapter 19, 33. So he translates it as, okay, before a gray head you shall rise, and you shall defer to an elder and fear your God. I am Yahweh. And let's get some commentary on that. So that's verse 32, I think he has it listed as. Sometimes the numbering is a little bit different. Okay, defer to an elder. So the idiom used is exactly the one that appears in verse 15 in the prohibition against deferring to the rich. Okay, we'll talk about that. It's a good point. We'll talk about that in a second. Context is everything. In court proceedings, no special consideration can be given to anyone, regardless of status. In everyday interactions, an old person deserves deference. Israeli buses used to carry a sign with the words before, "Gray head, you shall rise." Oh, wow, I just mentioned that before. I didn't expect him to say that, and that's true. As a reminder that passengers should give up their seats to the elderly. Okay, so he's referring this back to verse, what do you say? 15. So let's look at that very briefly. 1915. Okay. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, לא תישא פני דל, ולא תעדר פני גדול. בצדק תשפוט עמיתך. Do not do perversion, or do not pervert justice. Do not do perversion and justice. לא תישא פני דל. Do not lift up the face of a poor person. ולא תעדר פני גדול. And do not give honor to a great person, to a wealthy person, to a great person. Okay? לא תעדר פני גדול. It's the same words essentially. Okay? So don't, just because a person is wealthy or powerful or important in society, you don't give him in judgment before a court, you don't give him any special honor. He's judged just the same as any other person. And the same with a poor person. Okay, so lo te'edar v'lo te'edar p'nei chadol. Okay, and we see here in verse 32, v'data p'nei zaken, and give honor to the face of to the face of an elderly man. Okay, or before an elderly man. Okay, so here in was it 15? Lo te'edar p'nei gadol. Lo te'edar p'nei gadol. Do not give honor before the face of an important man. And here in 32, v'data p'nei zaken, and give honor before the face of an elderly man. It's exactly the same phrase. The first one is do not. The first is a negative one. This is a positive one. But other than that, the words are exactly the same. And clearly, verse 20 is referencing verse 15, as Robert Alter so correctly points out. Because, as I always like to say, the Torah is very self-referential. The Torah is extremely self-referential. It's constantly referring back to itself. It's constantly using the same phraseology on purpose, or using similar phraseology on purpose, or using opposite phraseology on purpose. You can almost think of the Torah as like the original Wikipedia with hyperlinks. The Torah is hyperlinked. How is it hyperlinked? It's hyperlinked by phrases that are the same or similar. Now, the rabbis and even the standard Egyptian Karaites call this hekesh, and unfortunately, they turn this idea into they make a mess out of it. So I can't think of an example offhand, but maybe the classic example is that the rabbis they see that the word milacha is used in Exodus chapter 35. Is it Exodus chapter 35? Thereabouts. It's used, the word milacha is used as that which is prohibited on the Shabbat. And then the word milacha is used to describe what is done to or the work that is being done. Milacha means work, so work is prohibited on the Shabbat. And then it uses the word milacha a lot to describe the work that is done to build the tabernacle. And the rabbis say that therefore, they use what's called a hekesh, and they say that therefore, because the same word is used to describe what's prohibited on Shabbat and to describe a lot of times the work that's done to build the tabernacle, that therefore the work that is done to build the tabernacle is precisely the type of work that's forbidden on Shabbat. And they come up with this idea of the Lametet Melachot, the 39 types of work that are forbidden on Shabbat, and they make a whole big mess out of it. And that's not even a good example, because that's just a single word. There really is no connection. But when you have phrases that are self-referential, and we see this, my God, we see this all over the Torah, then you could think of it as a kind of hyperlink that the Torah is referencing. It's referencing another part. It's asking you to click the link on that part and go to the other part that it's talking about. We see this so many times. I can't even mention it. But here's one that we see it. I'm trying to think of a very good example. See if I can think of one. Clearly, an example at the end of the book of Judges, the end of Sefer Shoftim, where we have the story about the tribe of Benjamin that shields one of its own after Benjaminite rapes a concubine, and we see the language there is clearly almost explicitly, almost word for word, referencing the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis, chapter 19, if my memory serves me correctly. And so it's there is a clear example where the Torah is being self-referential, but we see it all over the place. The Torah is constantly using phrases, is using stories that refer back to other stories, phrases that deliberately linked to other phrases that in other parts of the Torah or in the Tanakh that link to other parts of the Tanakh or back to the Torah. So, oh gosh, I have to plug in. God, how did it get down to 9% so quickly? So we see that constantly, and this is where we see definitely here. Okay, so 32. This is a deliberate reference back to 15. Okay, do not give special honor to an important man, and here give special honor to an elderly man. Okay, using the same words exactly, except one's in the negative, one's in the positive. Okay, give me a second. Let me plug in here. Okay, again, please let people know who have not found the study that the YouTube link that was published was incorrect. I'm not going to put on any music or anything like that. Just give me a second. Let me go grab my charging cable and plug in, and we'll continue. Wow, it's dark out already. Okay. One second, please. My God, 6:45, and it's already completely dark here in this room. Okay. And why are we not plugged in? What's going on here? What's going on? Okay. This is interesting. Sometimes that's weird. What the heck is going on? Let's try this again. There we go. Okay. So, where were we before I so rudely interrupted myself? Okay, so that's Leviticus 19:32, verse 33. Wachi yarur itra ger be'artzachem lo tonu oto. And if a ger should dwell with you in your land, lo tonu oto, do not oppress him, do not take advantage of him. And what is a ger? So this is something that I've looked at for years, and this is the best conclusion that I've come to so far. I might change my mind somewhere down the road because these words can be a bit malleable, but a ger is basically what we call today a convert. It's someone who permanently joins himself to the nation of Israel, someone who leaves his home, comes to live. At that time, the nation of Israel only lived in the land of Israel, or not at the time this was written, but soon afterwards, right? They only lived in the land of Israel. So someone who leaves his home nation and comes and lives in the land of Israel among the Israelites. Okay? So do not oppress, do not take advantage of. Tonu, mistreat, they translated as here. Let's look at this word for a second. Okay, yana, suppress, oppress, maltreat. Even in modern Hebrew, we have the word hona'ah, means like how would you say it in English? Hona'ah means like financial malfeasance or something like that, something along those lines. Late Hebrew, treat Arabic, imperfect. Then we see it again, yoneh, on and on and on. Right, so it appears a lot. So do not take advantage of, do not oppress, do not maltreat, perhaps suppress. See here. Okay, and we see, we have a reference to exactly the same. So Leviticus 19:33, that's where we are right now. And the same law is given with, of course, slightly different wording, as it always is in the Torah, in Exodus 22:21. Let's take a look at that. So v'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzena tilchatzenu ki gerim item be'eretz Misraim. So do not oppress. V'ger lo tonu, do not oppress. Toneh, do not oppress the ager. V'lo tilchatzenu, do not pressure him. Lachatz is like pressure, so do not maybe take advantage of, and do not oppress pressure. Do not take advantage of, and do not oppress the ager, ki gerim aitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were gerim in the land of Egypt. So were we gerim there? Yeah, we lived there permanently. We weren't passing through. We lived there for hundreds of years. In one place, the Torah says 400 years. Another place, it says 430 years. Another place, it says 280 years, as I believe it. I believe the 400 years that it's speaking about is from the time of Abraham being counted. That's another story. We've spoken about that before. At any rate, yes, we were gerim. We weren't converts for sure, but we were permanently living among the Egyptians. Okay, so we see the same commandment here. Again, another way that the Torah is self-referential is that we have repetition of many of the commandments. It would be interesting, I'm sure it's been done, but how many commandments are repeated more than once in the Torah? Many. And some more than twice. Lo tibashel gedi b'chalev imo, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk, is repeated 3 times. Famously, Shabbat, laws of Shabbat are repeated at least 5 times, maybe more. Okay. Verse 34. כאזרח מכם יהיה לכם הגר, הגר איתכם, ואף לא כמוך, כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים, אני יהוה אלוהיכם. So, כאזרח מכם, so an Ezrach is a native-born Israelite. An Ezrach is someone who can trace his patrilineal descent back to Jacob, at least at this point in time, and for many years, that's my understanding of it. There are other possibilities, but that's where I hold with that one. Okay, so an Ezrach is someone who says, can trace my father's father was Jacob. Okay, so Ezrach mikem yi'eh lechem hager. So just as a native-born Israelite, a patrilineally descended Israelite among you, yi'eh lechem hager, so shall be for you the ger, hagar itchem, that lives with you. And you shall love him as you love yourself. Because you were gerim in the land of Egypt. Ani Yahweh Elohechem. And we have again that following that pattern, every second verse, the Ani Yahweh here, Ani Yahweh. But here we have Ani Yahweh Elohechem, and we get a couple times the Ani Yahweh Elohechem instead of the Ani Yahweh, and it's very possible that the addition of the Elohechem is meant for the really, really to drive home the point for the, let's say, the more severe or the more serious commandments, right? The extra added Elohechem, I am Yahweh, your God, to really point that, hey, you really better listen to this one, okay? So right, what else is there to say? So v'ahavta lo kamocha is also clearly self-referential. To what? To v'ahavta re'echa kamocha, which we saw earlier. That was in this chapter. Was it verse 18, I believe, if I'm not mistaken? Right. So here, this is perhaps one of the most famous verses in all of the Torah. Lo tikom velo titor. Do not hold a grudge. Do not take revenge. Do not hold a grudge. Et bnei amecha, against the children of your people, against your fellow Israelites. V'ahavta le're'echa kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your fellow Israelite as yourself. Ani Yahweh. So v'ahavta le're'echa kamocha. So this is referring to your fellow Israelites. Whether that also includes the Gerim maybe is ambiguous here. Although I would say it does. But v'ahavta le're'echa kamocha, love your, I'll just translate it, love your neighbor as yourself is the way it's generally translated. It really means love your fellow Israelite as yourself, your fellow man, your fellow Israelite as yourself. And here we have in 33, v'ahavta lo kamocha. So here, v'ahavta le're'echa kamocha, love your fellow Israelite as yourself. And here in 33, v'ahavta lo kamocha. Okay, lager kamocha, and love him, meaning the ger, like yourself. So this is pointing out explicitly that you should treat the ger just the same way you would treat your fellow native-born Israelite. That if someone goes through all of the trouble to leave his nation and join our nation, the nation of Israel, then he deserves to be welcomed with open arms and treated as if he's an adopted member, an adopted member, but nonetheless a member of the family. Does that mean that all of the laws in the Torah apply equally to the Israelite as they do to the Ger? I would say no. Although, again, that's constantly in flux, in my opinion. I may change my mind down the road. Because we know that in the Torah, words can mean different things in different contexts, but there are certain commandments. The two I always like to point out is that the Torah does say that you can lend money, an Israelite can lend money to a ger with interest, and that a ger can eat nivela, and a ger can eat an animal that died on its own, or you can give it or sell it to the ger. Okay, it says give it to the ger or sell it to the notzri, to the nochri. So if ger is consistent when speaking or speaking when speaking in the context of the nation of Israel, then that does say right there that there are different laws for the gerim. They are not necessarily held to the exact same laws as a native-born Israelite, although that might be an incorrect interpretation, and that's something that's been ongoing for years. But for now, that's the way I understand it. We also know, for instance, let's see, the ger is not circumcised at the age of 8 days, probably, because he came to the nation after he was 8 days old. The ger does not have a land inheritance, and is in fact promised a land inheritance in the end of days prophecies. Is it in the book of Zechariah? Let's find that for a second. So Turner will get land among tribe he lives with. So that'll come up. Ezekiel 47:23. Let's look at that for a second. Just check in here. How you guys all doing? Can everybody hear me okay? Everybody enjoying the study, I hope. Let's get this out of the way. Oh, I can't. Okay, so we said Ezekiel 47:23. Let's take a look at that for a second. We'll look at it first in the English, and if we need to, we'll go over to the Hebrew. Okay, so let's read through quickly in the English. And just to an excuse to just read the Tanakh a little bit, we'll start here in verse 1. The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, where the temple faced east, which indeed it does. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits, and then he led me through water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was ankle deep, that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" I think we'll skip ahead a little bit. So what are we up to? This is verse 5. Let's skip ahead to 23. Okay, we'll start here. The boundaries of the land. This is what the sovereign Lord says. These are the boundaries of the land that you will divide among the 12 tribes of Israel as their inheritance, with 2 portions for Joseph. Why 2 portions for Joseph? Joseph was divided into 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim being the greater tribe, Manasseh being the lesser tribe. Ephraim being the younger son of Joseph, and Manasseh being the older son of Joseph. Reversal of the firstborn. We see that as an ongoing theme throughout the Tanakh. At any rate, I digress. You're to divide it equally among them because I swore with uplifted hand to give it to your ancestors. This land will become your inheritance. This is to be the boundary of the land. And then we get a whole bunch of descriptions of boundaries. Which, as we see, includes along the northern border of Damascus. Okay, Damascus was a city back then already. Mentioned already in the book of Genesis, Eliezer of Damascus. And so on and so forth. But let's get to here. Verse 21, you're to distribute this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. You are to, and this is an end of days prophecy, you are to allot it as an inheritance for yourselves and for the foreigners residing among you who have children. You are to consider them as native-born Israelites. Along with you, they are to be allotted an inheritance among the tribe of Israel. And whatever tribe of foreigner resides, there you are to give them their inheritance, declares the sovereign Lord. So this is an end of days prophecy that says that the Ger in the end of days will get land inheritance just like a native-born Israelite. This was not the case in ancient Israel. There was no land inheritance for the Gerim in ancient Israel. That's why the Ger has special protection. That's why it's mentioned explicitly in Exodus chapter 20 that he's not, and other places that he's not allowed to work on the Shabbat. That's why it says here in Leviticus chapter 19 that you're not allowed to oppress him. And many other examples. Okay, let's look at this very briefly in the Hebrew. Let's take that over to the Hebrew. So Ezekiel 47:21. We'll start at. verse 21, Wachilaktem et haaretz hazot lachem, the Shiftei Israel, you shall divide up this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel, for the tribes of Israel. Verse 22, we'll break it up. We know that the etnach, this little wishbone thing, is a semicolon. V'haya, tapilu אותה בנחלה לכם, ולהגרים, הגרים בתוככם, אשר הולידו בנים בתוככם. And you shall break it up or break it up by lot, actually. You shall by lottery break it up benachla lachem, as an inheritance for yourselves, ula'gerim, ulehagerim, agarim betochachem, and for the gerim that dwell among you, asher hulidu banim betochachem, who have given birth to children among you. Okay, so a ger, a person in Israel is, well, no, this is the reason for that is something a little bit different. But yeah, I was going to say something else, but I'll put it this way. Why for those who have children among you? Because if you don't have children, then you don't need a land inheritance, because once you die, you have no one to give the land to anyway. So you don't need a land inheritance. You could just live, temporarily in like a rental situation or something like that. However, if you have children, even females, as we know from the story of the daughters of Tzalafchat, which we'll get to eventually, then that becomes the inheritance that's given to your children. Your land is passed on to your children, and to their children's their children, and so on and so forth. And it can never be taken away, as we'll get to in Leviticus chapter 25 when we speak about the Jubilee year, the Yovel, that after in the Jubilee year, every 50th year, the land goes back to its original owners by inheritance. Okay. Wahayu lachem ke'ezrach b'vnei Yisrael. Oops. Wahayu lachem ke'ezrach b'vnei Yisrael. Itchem b'vnei Yisrael. Itchem yapiru b'nachala b'toch shiftei Yisrael. And it shall be wahayu lachem ke'ezrach b'vnei Yisrael. And it shall be for you like the native born among the children of Israel with you. Yapiru b'nachala b'toch shiftei Israel. You shall also be given a land inheritance by lot among the tribes of Israel. Oh God, there's the rockets going off in the background. Hold on a second. Nothing in cutscene, thank God, but close. In fact, let me check my app. Let's see. That was very close. 1 second. If you guys 1 minute ago, Kidmat Tzvi, that's right nearby. Kidmat Tzvi is about a 15-minute drive from here. That's why I heard it. And that sounded like the Iron Dome intercepting the missile. It sounds like a thud in the sky, like a boom, boom. It was like very loud fireworks. Okay. So they shall be like the native born among the children of Israel. Okay, does that mean for in every single respect? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is in this respect that they'll get a land inheritance. The Gerim at the end of the days will get a land inheritance like the native born of Israel. And my cat is hungry and I call it ringing the doorbell. Outside my cat is outside. Outside the door is there's a flashlight hanging on the door, and the cat is so smart that it learned to get my attention. All it needs to do is like bat the flashlight, and it makes a noise. And right, Shoshi boy? Soon, Shoshi boy. I'm gonna give you food. Maybe I'll go say hi to him for a second. Verse 23, Ezekiel 47:23. V'haya mashevet asher gar haher ito sham titnu nachalato neum Adonai Yahweh. So it shall be in the tribe where asher gar hager, in the tribe among which the ger lives, the tribe lives with Sham titnu nachalato. There he shall be. Sham. There he shall give him his inheritance. Neum Adonai Yahweh declares my master Yahweh. Here we see the word Adonai explicitly. Adonai is not the name of God. Adonai just means my master in the majestic plural form. Okay, 1 second. Let me just give me 1 second here. Let me just say hi to the cat for a second. Okay. I hear you, Shoshi boy. What, Shosha? What's the matter, baby? I hear you. You can't come in right now. I'm in the middle. Okay, soon. I'll give you your food soon. I know you're there. These cats are so smart. Oh my God. Blows me away just how smart cats are. I think they're smarter than human beings. I don't know how they do it. They get whatever they want, one way or another. Okay. I am definitely addicted to cats. I've had cats. I've had a cat when I was growing up, little girl cat that I grew up with, basically. And then when I was in Portugal, I adopted a number of cats. I took 2 of them with me to Israel, and they are wonderful little creatures. Okay. I hope you guys are cat lovers too. Go adopt cats. Okay. So, right. Okay, so that's that. Let's cut out of Ezekiel 47. So getting back to Leviticus 19. Okay, so we see, you shall love the ger as you love yourself. The ger should be treated as one of the family. You could think of it, the way I think of Israel and Gerim is it's like a family that has biological children and has adopted children. And the adopted in a good family, then the adopted children, they feel as much part of the family as the biological children. That is, I think, the perfect analogy for the ger. But the ger, on the other hand, isn't just, I don't think it's just someone who wakes up one day and decides, I want to be Jewish, which unfortunately happens, especially in a particular Karaite fringe group that I won't get into right now. But to be a ger, ultimately, it means coming to live in the land of Israel among the people of Israel. And then you could say, well, at this point in time, not even all the people of Israel live in the land of Israel. So why does the ger have to live in the land of Israel? So I say I understand that, and I would say that the ger, at least in his heart, has to have the desire to, when the time is right in the future in his life, if possible, to want to come live in the land of Israel, because that's ultimately the proof. If a ger cannot say, if someone who calls himself a ger says he wants to be a ger cannot honestly say in his heart, I want to come live in the land of Israel among the people of Israel, then I don't think, he may say, I can't do it right now for this reason, that reason, the other reason, but I don't think that unless he could say that in his heart, he or she, really ger only applies to he, so we'll say he, that person is a ger. If the person says, well, I really love Judaism, and I love the Torah, and I support Israel, but I'm an American, man. I'm born an American. I'm gonna die an American. I'm an American. Then the status that I would give that person is what I like to call nilwe. I think some people have translated it as an ally or a supporter of Israel. Okay, but someone anyone who places America before Israel, that could not, in my opinion, could not have the status of ger. If you want to be part of the nation of Israel, then your loyalty has to be first and foremost to the nation of Israel. It doesn't mean to the state of Israel, but it means to the nation of Israel and to the Torah and to Yahweh. And that involves knowing in your heart that someday, if not you, but at least your children or your grandchildren, you know in your heart that you want them to live in the land of Israel among the people of Israel. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on? We'll go for about another 45 minutes, I think. I'm enjoying this study, and I absolutely will get done with Leviticus chapter 19 today, no matter what. This is already the 5th week we spent on Leviticus 19. It's fine. It's a great chapter. They're all good, but it's very detailed in the sense that it's a lot of varied laws. It's not like one set of laws that all work together. There's a certain theme, right? but it's not a single set of laws, shall we say. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on? Can you guys all hear me okay? Technically, we're doing okay here. Let's just check in to see if anyone else is. So if you want to know, by the way, there's an app. Let's see. Mashdal Shams. I was going to go to Mashdal Shams today. There's an app called Sofar. If you want to see where the missiles and drones are landing in Israel, you can download this app, and then you could set alerts. Let's say you have a relative or a friend in a particular area. If you want to set it for Katsrin, where I live, then you could set it for Katsrin. That would, I think they spell it Katzrin in the app, and you could pray whenever you hear the app go off. You can pray. Don't set it for every area because it'll just be going off constantly. But if you have a particular friend, a relative, or area that you're concerned about, set it for that area. And if you hear that a missile is being launched in that area, the app will make a sound. Even if you have it set for do not disturb, it will make a sound because it's really designed for people here in Israel to get alerts that missiles are heading towards them. But if, I guess there might be a setting to shut it off. But the name of the app is Sofar, Tzofar. Okay, let's go on to Leviticus 19. Let's see if Robert Alter has anything interesting to say about this. No, he doesn't. Okay. Verse 35. Lo ta'asu awel b'mishpat, b'midah, b'mishkal, u'b'misura. So do not do perversion. Do not pervert. I'm going to translate it this way. Do not pervert judgment. We saw that earlier. So this is now again being self-referential. That was again in, was it 15? No, 15. Verse 15. Okay. Lo ta'su avel mishpat. And then we said, Lo tisa pnei dal, do not raise up the face of the poor person, velo te'edar pnei gadol, and do not give undue honor to an important person, to a rich or important person. But here we have Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. So this chapter is being very self-referential. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. It's exactly the same words, word for word. Okay? Do not do perversion in judgment. Okay, do not pervert justice. But then it takes it in a different direction. So it starts with that as the base. Do not do perversion. Do not pervert justice. Do not pervert judgment. But then it goes on. It takes it in a completely different direction. But midah. Do not pervert judgment. Or do not do perversion in judgment. Right? Perversion, it's a bad translation because perversion, when I say it that way, it makes it sound like, like pornography or something like that. Do not pervert, I'm going to say this, do not pervert justice, measurement, weight, or this would be liquid measure. Okay? So this would be a midah, would be measure of length. Let's see how they translate it here. Okay, they just translate, measurement of length. Mishkal is a measurement of weight. And misura is going to be volumetric measure of volume. And that's exactly how they translate here. Misura would be the image there is filling something up, right? Like filling up a container with something to measure a volume. Let's even look at that word. They just translate here as a measure, but it really means measure of volume, measure of water, capacity. There we go. Child derivative is dubious. Use root, meaning apparently to divide, a measure for liquids. Measure. So I don't want to, I don't like to do, fly by the pants etymology, but it's possible that the word measure, the English word measure, comes from this word misura. Certainly sounds similar, but more likely, I think it actually comes from here, from midah. So midah, I think the English word measure, I think can be traced back to the Latin word meter, like a meter, which means a measure. And that probably can be traced back to midah. Let's just look at that for 1 second. Out of curiosity. Measure etymology. No, I said etymology. Etymology of measure. From the Old French mesurer, measure, moderate curve. From the late Latin mensurare, measure from Latin mensura, a measurement thing to be measured by, from mensus, past participle of metiri, to measure. And then they go to Proto-Indo-European, we'll forget that. So we have this metiri, to measure. Okay, so that's the original Latin, and I think the word meter also means a measure, the noun. I think it'll say it here. Measuring from mensus past, metiri to sort of meaning, music, measured. Okay, close enough. So I think it comes from metiri, which is related to the word meter or meter, and that certainly sounds like the Hebrew word midah. Okay, midah means a measurement or a measure. So I would imagine that you could probably trace it back from Latin, back through Greek, back through Aramaic, straight back to Hebrew. So if so, then the word measure does come from the Hebrew, but not from misurah, even though it sounds closer to the English word measure, but more likely from this word here, midah. At any rate, just as we're not supposed to pervert justice, we're also not supposed to pervert measurement, weight, different types of measurement, right? Length, measurements of length, measurements of weight, and measurements of volume. And this is actually called an abomination. Now, should we go there now? I really want to get done with this, but let's do that. There are certain things in the Torah that are called an abomination. Now, when you ask anyone what in the Torah is called an abomination, they always say the same thing: homosexuality. That's the thing that is usually mentioned. But actually, there are a bunch of things that are called abominations which have absolutely no connection to sexual misconduct, sexual depravity, or whatever you want to call it. So let's see, where can we find this? Let's do this. Abominations in the Bible. Okay, Proverbs 6:16. See if we can grab the word. Okay. So let's let's read these verses, okay? Shesh hena sone Yahweh. 6 things Yahweh hates. V'sheva to avat nafsho. And 7 are abominations to his soul. Poor translation, but we'll go with that. Okay. And then it goes to list Einain Ramot, Lashon Shaker, so haughty eyes, a lying tongue, Yadayim Shofchot Dam Naki, hands that spill innocent blood, Lev Choresh Makshavot Aven, heart that searches out thoughts of iniquity, or wicked thoughts, Raglaim Mimarot Larutz Rera'a, feet that rush that rush to and run to do evil. Yafir Kizavim, Aid Shakir, Yafir Kizavim, someone who inflates lies or who spreads lies. Aid Shakir, a lying witness. Mishalech Midani ben Achim, and he who sows strife between brothers. Okay, so how many do we have listed? Einayim Ramot, haughty eyes. Lashon Shaker, a lying tongue, that's 2. Hands that spill innocent blood, that's 3. Lev Choresh Machshavot Aven, a heart that seeks out evil thoughts, that's 4. Raglaim Memarot Larutz Ra'ah, feet that run to do evil, that's 5. Yafich Kizavim, that's 6. Or maybe that's 1. Yafich Kizavim, Eid Shakar. Wait 1 second. Maybe that's 1. So one who inflates lies as a lying witness. Umishalech madanim ben achim, and he who sows the strife between brothers. That's 7. Okay. So these are called to'evot. But let's find also where else we see the word to'evot or abomination. Oops. Let's try that again. So I forget Genesis because it's not relevant. That's not. So here, Leviticus 18:22, this is the reference to homosexuality. That's called a to'eva, one who sleeps with a male as he would sleep with a female, referring specifically to anal sex, by the way. And then we have, that's called Ela. Yeah, Simikot Tovet Ela, it's 18. That's the same thing here. That's reference to homosexuality in Leviticus 20:13. That's not relevant. Let me just find one other example. Here, let's Deuteronomy 17:1. לא תזבח ליהוה אלוהיך שור, ועשה אשר יהיה בו מום, כל דבר רע, כי תועבת יהוה אלוהיך הוא. So do not slaughter to Yahweh your God a bull or a lamb that has a blemish in it. Right? It's not a perfect animal that's being sacrificed to Yahweh. It's a kind of blemish. I don't know, it's missing an ear or it's blind in one eye or something like that. Kol davar ra, or any other bad thing about it. Ki to'avat Yahweh Elohecha hi. Because this is an abomination to Yahweh your God. Okay, so this example of something else, it's called a to'eva. Let's find maybe one other example. Deuteronomy 18:12. So let's get the context there. So this is again the speaking about the what we just saw in Leviticus chapter 19, the mediums and the people who contact the spirits, the people who speak to the dead. Okay, to do not work with them, because it is an abomination to Yahweh, all of those who do these things. And because of these abominations, Yahweh has disinherited them before you. Speaking about the Canaanites, the Amorites. Okay, so there are many things that are called an abomination throughout the Torah. Those are just two examples, or throughout the Tanakh. Those are just two examples. But one of the ones that I was looking for, I can't find it right now, is improper weights and measures. But we're not going to look for it here. Anyway, these are 7 to'evot. All right, verse 36. Ma'azne tzedek, avnes tzedek, efat tzedek, vahin tzedek yi'eh lachem. Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher otzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. So now we have, this is actually really interesting. So let me translate it first. This is verse 36. So balances or balance weights. How do they translate here? Scales, there we go. But really it means ma'uzne. It's the old type of scales where you balance a weight on one side and the fruits on the other side, right? Azan means, or it means to balance. So, okay, we'll say scales. So scales of justice, avnei tzedek, stones of justice. What does that mean? Again, that's a reference to when you take the stones. If you've ever seen, even to this day, I remember when I was back in Portugal and we lived in a very small village. There were some places where I'd buy things and they would put weights on one side and then they put the fruit on the other side in order to weigh it. So you'd have a 1 kilogram weight or half a kilogram weight. In ancient times, this was done with stones that weighed a certain amount. So you had a stone that weighed one. It wasn't a kilogram back then. It was a is it again? I guess a shekel, which is where you get the English word scale from. So, so stones of justice, a fa is, they usually translate that as, I think they translate it as a fa, but that is a volumetric weight of a dry measure. So you would measure like an ephah of flour. Okay, it's spoken about, I think we saw earlier in Leviticus when it speaks about how much flour is supposed to be brought for the grain offerings. So an ephah is dry measure. Hin tzedek, that's a measure of liquid. That's a liquid volumetric measure. Yelechem. So scales of justice, stones of justice, an ephah. Okay, dry measure of justice, wet measure of justice, wet volumetric measure of justice. Yelechem shall be for you. Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh your God, asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took you out of the land of Egypt. So not only do we get an Ani Yahweh here, and not only do we get an Ani Yahweh Elohechem, I am Yahweh your God, we get an Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh Elohechem asher, who took you out of the land of Egypt. So he's really driving it home on this one. Now it could be that this is just because this is the end of the chapter, and not just the I guess you can call it the Christian numbering or the medieval numbering, but we see this as an end of a chapter in the Masoretic texts, in the original Torah text, because we see a peh here, So it is the end of a chapter, and that's probably the reason we're getting this long Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher tziti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I'm Yahweh, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, because it's emphasizing this for all of the commandments that we've learned since the beginning here, the beginning of this chapter. But certainly it's also referring to this. This seems to be, I know this because it's also mentioned a bunch of other times throughout the Tanakh, that this idea of having fair weights and measures, and it's called an abomination. I can't remember where right now. I'll have to look it up at some point. To not have fair, to not have honest weights and measures. So this is considered a very, very serious thing, to have proper weights and measures, fair weights and measures. So what is it? When you go, let's say your Abnei Tzedek, your stone, instead of having a stone of a just stone or a stone of justice, so your stone, your weight is not quite a kilogram, it's maybe 900 grams. But it says the word 1 kilogram on it. And then you go to buy a kilogram of apples, you put the apples on one side, or the salesperson, the seller, puts the apples on one side, puts his 1 kilogram weight, which is actually 900 grams, on the other side, and says, okay, it's exactly a kilogram of apples. Pay me, 10 shekels. Except it's not a kilogram of apples. It is 900 grams of apples or 800 grams of apples. So that's the importance when you have these weights and measures of justice. It means that they're accurate. You're not cheating people when you're selling to them. A kilogram is a kilogram, or in this case, a shekel is a shekel, an ephah is an ephah, a hin is a hin. All of the measurements are fair and standardized. Right? Because it'd be very easy to have these measures that are, if you're the seller, that are under the actual amount or under the actual standardized weight or measure. And then you're going to be ripping off the people, not just once, but every time someone buys from you. And this is considered an abomination in the eyes of Yahweh. And so it's given the serious treatment. Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher tziti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I'm Yahweh, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. But again, this is also, I think, a summary sentence referring to all of the laws that we've seen since the last Hebrew chapter ending, which would have been, let's see where, probably the end of 18. In fact, it is. There's a peh. That means a parsha ptucha. So often or sometimes the chapter endings, the English or the medieval chapter endings follow the Hebrew chapter endings, or follow the Hebrew chapters. In this case, it is the case. So this is kind of, we know that the Torah usually starts with, or subjects in the Torah, or shall we call them chapters in the Torah, in the true chapters in the Masoretic texts, usually start with introductory sentences and then summary sentences. So this is clearly a summary sentence, and that's why it doesn't just say Ani Yahweh or Ani Yahweh Elohechem. It says Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher tziti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, because it's summing up that all of these laws, you should remember exactly who's telling you that. Don't forget who's giving you these laws. Don't forget me, or else you're in deep trouble, which of course Israel ended up being in. But this acts as a summary sentence, but it also, I think, because this is the final law in Leviticus 19, the Ma'aznei Tzedek, Avnei Tzedek, Efat Tzedek, Vehin Tzedek, I think it shows how important that particular law is, and we see it from other places in the Tanakh as well. Okay, verse 37, V'shamartem, and another summary sentence, V'shamartem et kol chukotai wa et mishpatai wa asitem otam ani Yahweh, and you shall keep all of my statutes and all of my judgments and do them, ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh. Excuse me. All right, let's see what Robert Alter may have to add here. So in measure, whether in weight or liquid measure, the literal sequence of the Hebrew is in measure, in weight, in liquid measure. And that's for 35. Yeah, that's correct. Though some contend that the first word midah refers to measures of length and breadth. That's what I believe it is. It is a general term introducing the category of measurement, which is then followed by different types of measurement. Okay, let me look at that for myself. Maybe. Okay, and he doesn't have any other commentary on that. Let's just find where it says that improper measures are an abomination. Improper measures are an abomination. Bible verse. Good. Thank you, Rabbi Google. Proverbs 20, 10 through 13. Is that what we looked at? I can't even remember now. Proverbs. Proverbs 20. Yeah, it's 20. Well, I don't know. It's 13. Oh, okay. So it's just 10. So here it is. Proverbs 20:10. Evan. Wa Evan. Ifa. Wa Ifa. To Avat. Yahweh. Gam Shnehem. So it means, I'll translate literally, a rock and a rock. And Efa, which again we said is a dry measure, a dry volumetric measure. So an Efa and an Efa. To Avat Yahweh is an abomination to Yahweh. Gam Shnehem. Both of them. So what does it mean, Evan be'evan? It means you have two different weights. One when you're buying, one when you're selling. When you're buying, you put down the kilogram. It says 1 kilogram on it, but it's really 1.2 kilograms. So you say, oh, I'd like to buy a kilogram of apples. Here, I'll use my own scale. I'll use my own weight. Put down the kilogram weight. You say, here, I'll pay you for a kilogram, but you're really getting 1.2 kilograms. And then a different weight when you're selling, which is instead of a kilogram, is going to be 800 grams. You say, here's a kilogram of your apples, but the weight only is 800 grams, and so the person's only buying 800 grams of apples rather than a kilogram. Okay, so there it is, Proverbs 20:10. We see that these measurements that are not just, not of justice, are to'avat Yahweh, are an abomination to Yahweh, or abomination of Yahweh. Okay. And Yardain says, yeah, I would assume an abomination in Tanakh can be sodomy, but it isn't limited to sodomy. And that's exactly the point. It makes sense to be against it. However, the mental obsession with being against it seems to be a Christian. Exactly my point, Yardain. Thank you very much. That's exactly the point I want to try to make, that whenever people think that the only thing the Torah calls an abomination is sodomy, or is homosexuality, if you want to call it that. I don't even like to use the word sodomy, because the crime of Sodom was not that. The crime of Sodom was it's mentioned as spilling blood and mistreating the poor, etc. But we'll just call it anal penetration of a man by another man. That's what everyone focuses on. And Yardain, I think, so correctly points out that yes, that is definitely called an abomination in the Torah, but it's not the only thing that's called an abomination. So why the obsession just with that? And Yardain, I think, correctly says, seems to be a Christian trait. And we'll leave it at that. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we end today's study? Any questions, any comments? I hope you enjoyed the study. I'm sorry about the mess up with the links. Please let people know about the studies. It is true, I do it slightly different times each week, because each week is different for me. I don't have an exact set time when I know I'm going to be done with lunch, or I'm going to start dinner, or each Shabbat is a little bit different. So I do it when I can. In general, now that I'm in Israel and I'm 7 hours ahead of the United States, rather than when I was in Portugal and I was 5 hours ahead of the United States, in general, I'm going to be doing it earlier, American time. So if you're tuning in from America, just get used to the idea that in general, and especially now since Shabbats are ending earlier in Israel, get used to the idea that the talks are going to be earlier American time, because now a 7-hour time difference rather than a 5-hour time difference when I was in Portugal for 4 years. I was in Portugal between March 2020 and June 2024. And there was a 5-hour difference. Any rate, any comments, any questions before we end it? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was a good study. Next time we'll go on to Leviticus 20, which is kind of, in certain ways, it is a rehashing of Leviticus 18, incest and sexual depravity, but it also gets into other things as well. So next week we'll start Leviticus chapter 20. It took us 5 weeks to get through Leviticus 19. I think Leviticus 20 will go much more quickly because it's not a cornucopia of, it's not a smorgasbord of different laws. Excuse me. Whereas Leviticus 19 really was that. And I think that's the reason that took so long, but we're not in any rush. However long it takes, it takes. We disconnected from the rabbinical Parshat Shavuot cycle, and so we're not in any rush. As long as it takes to get through a chapter, it's how long it takes. The important thing is that we are learning Torah together. Okay, if there are no other questions, there are no other comments, then I think I'm going to end the study here. I thank you all for joining me. Please spread the word about the study. Also, I've started doing a lot of short videos, short format videos, which, believe it or not, have gotten a lot more views than I expected, and have gotten a lot more views than these studies, that's for sure. I guess people, attention spans are, instead of 3 hours, are about 1 minute, which is how long those shorts are. But they're on the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel, so you can check them out there. I think the one with the most views has over 10,000 or close to 10,000 views at this point. I'll have to look at it. About the East Gate, the Golden Gate on the eastern wall of Jerusalem from Herodian times. Okay, any rate, thank you for joining us here. This this has been Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And Be'esarat Yahweh, we will continue the study again next week. We'll go out with a bit of music as usual. Let's see what we got here. 1 second, please. Okay, let's choose that one. And B'ezrat Hashem, we will see you again next week. Wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Tov.
Alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos me se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vaporicos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vaporicos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Mi querido es hermoso, dos caras tiene con él la una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa shishpish. La una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa shishpish. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. La, 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 Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Cuando el rey Nimrod al cabo salía, vino en el cielo y en la estrellería, viéndolo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham vino. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. La mujer de Tera que penada, día ella preguntaba, ¿qué tiene la cara tan demonada? Ella ya sabía el bien que tenía. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Al fin de los 9 meses Cari quería, iba caminando por campos en viñas, y a su marido no le descubría, topó una mara liparería. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito,